Good evening, everybody. I'm Alexa Chapivsky, the Executive Director of the Women's Foreign Policy Group, and on behalf of WFPG and the U.S. China Education Trust, welcome. We are thrilled to partner with USCET in this capacity this evening as we advance our mission of elevating and advancing women leaders in foreign affairs. Whether you're a young professional or at the pinnacle of your career, we would love to welcome you to our membership of over 900 mostly women professionals across government, business, policy, academia, tech and innovation, and journalism, all with some nexus to foreign affairs. If you're a young professional, our robust mentorship program is a highlight to our younger members and indeed has driven our greater than 132% membership growth rate over the past 2 years. Thank you very much for being with us this evening. We have been looking forward to this convening and are grateful to have the engagement of such respected leaders in their fields. It's my honor, before I introduce Ambassador Julia Chang Block, to read welcome remarks from Dr. Alyssa Ayers, the Dean of GW's Elliott School of International Affairs and the first woman to hold the post. Also, I should say, a WFPG board member. We are grateful for her service. She writes, I am so thrilled that this evening's panel discussion brings the collaborative strengths of the U.S. China Education Trust together with the Women's Foreign Policy Group to showcase women's leadership in U.S. China policy. This evening, you will have the opportunity to hear about the personal and professional paths of 3 distinguished experts on China and U.S. China relations across the foreign policy, defense and national security, and political economy spaces. Each of these arenas is under stress at the moment, and I know that Mercy Kuo, Yun Sun, and Wenchi Yu will all have thoughtful insights on the history that led to today's challenges, as well as what might lie ahead. I regret that I'm unable to join in person due to previously planned travel, but as the Dean of the Elliott School and a board member of the Women's Foreign Policy Group, I'm excited about the conversation you will have this evening and will look forward to watching it. Thank you very much, Alyssa. Now it's my distinct honor to introduce to you Ambassador Julia Chang Block, USCET Executive Chair. It is a double honor for us because without her, we would not exist. Ambassador Block was the co-founder of WFPG exactly 30 years ago. Thank you, Ambassador Block, for your vision and for your tenacity in establishing this organization and for your continued steady support, not only for WFPG, but across so many foreign affairs arenas. We are deeply grateful to you. Over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alyssa. Well, as founder of the U.S. China Education Trust and now executive chair, I feel really privileged to welcome you all on behalf of USCET to this discussion today. Because I really cannot believe that it's been 27 years, more than a quarter century, since I became the first Asian American ambassador in U.S. history. I am especially delighted, as Alyssa mentioned, that the Women's Foreign Policy Group, another organization, as she said, that I co-founded, is co-sponsoring this program as it celebrates its 30th anniversary this year. It's like as if I had children. As we celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, we bring you 3 AAPI women experts who are each actively contributing to the public discourse on U.S. foreign policy and U.S. China relations. In the 1990s, our panel today would not have been possible. Female presence, let alone voices, in foreign policy were rarely seen or heard. Many careers, as you know, have traditionally been reserved for men. Diplomacy was the unquestionably the preserve of men. American women did not enter the diplomatic arena or join the ranks of ambassadors until what year? Take a guess. Until what year?
70s?
Earlier than that. America is not that bad. Anybody else? Come on, give a wild guess. Nobody? Come on.
1955.
That's still late. I'll tell you. 1934. Conventional wisdom held then that women were not fit to serve abroad, as they could not be assigned to places considered dangerous or unsafe. And who made the decisions as to whether a place is safe or unsafe? Men. In 1967, as a returned Peace Corps volunteer seeking a job overseas, I was told that somebody who looked like me would not be accepted by Asian countries. They would not accept a young Asian woman. I was young then, in any position of authority. Well, luckily, I did not take no for an answer. And here I stand before you today. Well, women's representation, women's voices are important. Why? Because foreign policy and the world need women as active agents in global peace, security, and prosperity. This panel of three talented Asian American foreign policy experts, who just happen to be women, would not have really been possible 30 years ago. Today, we are beneficiaries of their unique perspectives and lenses. For young AAPI professionals, no, for all young professionals, our panel today offers living proof that careers in international affairs are possible, if not essential, and rewarding. Let me now introduce Wenchi Yu, who has a storied career working in the U.S. Congress, the State Department under Hillary Clinton, at Goldman Sachs, leading the 10,000 Women Program in Asia, and as an executive at VIP Kids, not to mention her nonprofit, Global Women Asia. Wenchi is a young, old friend of mine. She stands out for me as the future of women in diplomacy, with a career that spans multiple sectors, a versatile expert in Asia and global affairs, an advocate for expansive leadership and diverse perspectives. She will moderate our panel and guide us through the past, present, and future of U.S. China policy, joined by two additional foreign policy experts, Mercy Kuo and Yun, who are also young, old friends of mine, who they will take us beyond their academic and professional knowledge, sharing with us their lived experiences and nuanced perspectives that enrich U.S. foreign policy. So now I turn the mic over to you, Wenchi.
Stay here.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ambassador Chang Black. I'm truly humbled to be introduced by, I'll just call you Julia, if that's okay. Because we first met when I don't know if you remember, when I was working at the State Department, and we were trying to put together the very first U.S. China Women Dialogue. Yes, and you know, there's really no one else that kind of represents that U.S. China women dialogue. That's Ambassador Chang Bok. So thank you for joining us back then, so many years ago. And of course, ever since, Julia has been a mentor. I think the most incredible thing about someone like her, of course, a woman, is that she never stops giving back. Even 10, 15 years ago when we met, she's already talking about wanting to retire. But I know that's just not going to be possible, right? Rosie knows. So today I'm really, really pleased to be able to do this. And of course, Alexa, Women's Foreign Policy Group, I've been a huge fan. And thank you so much for holding the fort, you know, during challenging times. But, you know, bringing sort of the two worlds together, women and China, I feel like that's, you know, that makes me really happy because we oftentimes don't get to do that. And of course, thank you, Rosie, for organizing and bringing everyone together. So I'll say a little bit, what I am hoping to get out of today's conversation, of course, is to have a slightly different kind of conversation about U.S.-China relations. I think, you know, this town, everyone is used to those very big talks about U.S.-China relations, and I'm hoping, since we have two, you know, female Asian American speakers who could bring their personal experience and perspectives into those conversations and perhaps bring a different kind of insight as well. So I want to say May is, as Julia said, the Asian American Heritage Month. So we're really pleased to, you know, have a panel, and rarely do you see that, the whole panel of Asian American women to talk about U.S.-China relations. How ironic. And our identity, be it cultural, racial, ethnic, or gender, based, and our experience, I think, you know, shape our perspectives, how we view ourselves, how we view others, and how we form our opinions, and of course, about foreign policy analysis as well. So, I'm gonna ask everyone to share first a little bit about your background. Not so much about, you know, the bios that people can read online, but really your upbringing. I think that would give people a really interesting perspective, and I'll start with myself. So, I obviously sitting here in Washington D.C., but I was born in Taiwan as an immigrant, and I moved here after college and naturalized as a citizen. But I served in the U.S. government, and so I've been observing China mostly from Washington D.C.'s perspective until I moved to Asia. Really trying to absorb the local perspectives. And of course, you know, now that Taiwan is more in the news headlines again, and watching how Washington, D.C. talk about Taiwan, I have various complex feelings and emotions, and I do hope to bring that perspective into those conversations. So I'll stop here.
Oh boy. That's a great opening remark that will be very difficult to outcompete. And thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, Alexei, for bringing us together and to share some of the things that are not in the bio. What is not in the bio? So obviously, maybe not obvious. I was born in China. I was in China because I lived in China until I was 25. And my family has an interesting background. I'm tall, round eye, round face. So some of you might guess that I'm not a Han. I'm not a Han ethnic Han. My family is Manchu. So we've been living in Beijing for 400 years, blah, 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 until Cultural Revolution. My father was in junior high school. He was labeled as a young intellectual. You're in junior high school. 16 years old, you have 2 years of junior high school education. Therefore, your young intellectual needs to be re-educated. So that's when he was sent to the rural west of China. To where? You probably all know terracotta. So between Shanxi province and Shanxi province, where the Yellow River took the turn,
that's where he was sent, where he met my mother and where I was born. And of course, then in the late 80s and early 90s, Deng Xiaoping had this policy that young intellectuals that were sent to the rural west of China during the Cultural Revolution were allowed to come back to their hometown, because remember, China still, as of today, still has a hukou registration system. Basically, where you're registered is where you're supposed to be. If you move around, you will have to, well, hukou registration won't move around with you. So unless and until you can convince the new locale government that you should be reaccepted or accepted as a local, your hukou registration will always be where it was previously registered. So in the 90s, we were allowed to go back to Beijing, where I went to junior high school, and then college, and I went to Foreign Affairs College. And this, people don't know about this. It's a Cold War communist country special design. Basically, all the ministries of the government has their own college, right? So if you are the Ministry of Commerce has its own University of Foreign Trade and Economics, and the Foreign Ministry has its own diplomatic academy called the Foreign Affairs College. I think Russia still has it, and North Korea still has it. Vietnam definitely has it because their diplomatic academy engages in most of the South China Sea conversations. So anyway, so I went to Foreign Affairs College and I saw that, oh, it's pretty great. Let me learn English well and maybe I will be looking at a career as a diplomat. And then until I was in the year for graduation and I was told that, well, you are a girl, so it's not recommended. It was not, they didn't put it in writing that you're a woman, therefore you will not be recruited, but it was said very clearly and privately that it's not recommended. You may as well just leave the opportunity to the men to get the foreign ministry entrance exam. Why? There's a very specific reason. So in the Chinese system, foreign ministry is regarded as a glamorous but not that well-paid job, right? So compared to a lot of the other local jobs, especially compared to people who can work for foreign company. So around that time, around year 2000, I think foreign ministry faced a challenge of a talent drain, not a brain drain, talent drain, especially men drain. Because the men realized that, well, with their foreign language capability, with their foreign experience, they can get much better paid jobs with, say,
Business. Yeah.
with businesses, especially foreign companies that are operating in China, right? So a lot of men leave, but women did not, because I would say that at that point, up to that point, what you just mentioned. Oh, okay.
If you
Sorry.
shorten.
Okay, I'll make it short. So basically, long story short, women was not recommended. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go to graduate school, and then after graduate school, I came here. I actually came to GW 21 years ago. So working in the foreign policy field, what is some of the interesting aspect? I think coming from a foreign background, especially U.S. China relationship, is so critical and so controversial and so much discussion these days. Bringing a empathetic perspective to be able to see China and to see the logic of the behavior, because if you watch a lot of the analysis, China's behavior and policy seems to be nonsensical. It doesn't make sense, and how stupid are they? But with language capability, with cultural understanding, and also with the regular interaction with Chinese foreign policy community, kind of see their logic. And I think it's really an exciting job to be able to interpret that, at least in English language that American audience can also understand. Because if you read People's Daily, I think they're trying to do a very good job explaining their position, but not always very successfully. So I think that part of the analytical work is truly fascinating, and it's something that's, sorry,
Thank you. That's great.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mercy Kuo. I would also like to thank USCET and the Women's Foreign Policy Group for inviting me to join the conversation this evening. Very briefly, made in America. I was born here. I'm the child of immigrants. My parents came here in the 60s for graduate school, and I grew up in Southern California. And then basically from there went all over the world. But I wanted to mention when she asked me, how do I know Ambassador Chang Block? And I will say this. So as I said, I'm a child of immigrants. When I was a kid, my mother would give me books to read on American women, pioneers and leaders. So I'd read about Florence Nightingale, Susan B. Anthony, Helen Keller. And then throughout my youth, she would just give me things to read about these kind of women. One day she gave me a newspaper clip. First Chinese American, Asian American ambassador, Julia Chang Block. This was 1989, I believe. So it made such an impression because at the time in California, there were only 2 Asian women that we were aware of. The first one was the Secretary of State of California, March Fong Yu, who was a Democrat, yes, ambassador of Micronesia following you, the pioneer sitting right here. And then the other was the CBS anchor, Connie Chung. Some of you might know. But in the realm of diplomacy, foreign policy, this was the first. So that left an indelible impression on me, and I thought, I could be an ambassador, someone like me who looks like me, or be a pathbreaker, the first, as her father was the first Chinese to graduate from Harvard Law School. And so this thinking of, yes, there are those who are the pathfinders, pathbreakers. And that was a seminal impression for me that has stayed with me throughout my life. So what an honor when I did finally meet Julia in, I think, 2013 at a Committee of 100 event, to finally meet her in person and talk to her. That was just like, an unforgettable moment. And then to be invited to speak at both organizations that she founded. So I am quite honored to be here tonight and to be with such an esteemed panel.
Perfect. So, thank you. I thought that would be really helpful. And I want to talk about U.S.-China relations. We were talking, I mean, obviously it's in the news every day, right? I mean, you can find all kinds of opinions about it, whether you agree with it or not. What do you think, from your point of view, is missing in all the conversations about U.S.-China relations or observing, analyzing U.S.-China relations?
What is missing? If you look at how large the community is, most of the issues are indeed very thoroughly and well covered. But I think what potentially is missing is different opinions. We have a lot of debate, for example, in the intellectual. We used to have a lot of debates about what the China policy should look like, but now there seems to be a truth that is indisputable, that also does not allow for much challenge or opposition. There are censorship and self-censorship involved, which is kind of sad because if you think about self-censorship, that's more like a Chinese phenomenon rather than when you think about the academic freedom here. So I think what is missing is the different views and also the tolerance sometimes for different views.
And do you feel like, especially because you are originally from China, do you feel like that played any role in terms of how you voice your opinion, especially right now?
I think that's the beauty of being an analyst rather than an advocate.
Yeah.
Because well, actually, coming from China is kind of liberating because although I work in a think tank, I don't see it as a revolving door. I will be always in that door, right? Because I won't be working for U.S. government. I have family members still living in China, so I don't have that problem. So I don't need to be concerned about what I said or what I wrote this year might become an obstacle for my future government career down the road because I'm not going to have one. So that's kind of liberating. You can call a spade, and you can reflect on what I genuinely believe is a motivation of the Chinese behavior. So some people like it, some people don't like it. Some people say, "Oh, this is way too empathetic to the Chinese perspective." But I think even in policy analysis, the ability to see the issue from the perspective of your opponent is also a required, at least it's a piece that needs to be in the picture. So it's kind of liberating.
Mercy?
So I would say what's missing is really the articulation of a strategic vision and a compelling narrative of this country's China policy and what is the direction of U.S. China relations? Is there an end game? What does this country envision about the relationship with China and why does it matter to the American people? I think this narrative still, as Yunsen said, there's a lot of diverse views, but what is that compelling vision that can unite us as a country to get this relationship right? I mean, Ambassador Block, what I believe she said at one point, the most important relationship in the world is between the United States and China. If these two countries don't get along, the world will not have a hope or a prayer. And I think that really rings true still today. Where is this relationship headed? I mean, there are a lot of tactical moves that both sides are making. But what do we envision as a future for this relationship?
Um, if I may use my moderator's privilege, I do think we have actually very limited information about this relationship and about China. I think we see a lot of information about certain type, as you said, it's like, you know, certain perspectives, but even the varieties of information we're getting or thinking about China, we don't have journalists on the ground these days. We don't have as many people on the ground anymore, not even students, not business people. So the information that's coming out, also because of today's media and algorithm and all that, tends to skew towards one kind. On top of that, you have this like political climate that pretty much only allows one type of voice. So it is, you know, I find that the information gap and the perception of China is way more skewed compared to, you know, even years ago, which is very ironic since we're living in a modern technology age, but somehow we're not getting the diverse information that we should be getting. And so on that, I want to ask you, in your own sort of process of working, since there's so much information out there, but the quality of information may not be as high as before. Let's be honest. So, how do you sift through the information and how do you evaluate what information is worth your time? Right? Because time is extremely important.
Well, really assessing the quality of information requires ascertaining the veracity of the source and also the method of collection. Okay, and this is my US government background talking as well as my doctoral field research speaking. And just to give you some perspective, so I was educated in the 20th century where before the advent of the internet and the iPhone, at that time, we only had books, journals, and something what some of you may not even know called microfiche. And microfiche is transparent film, okay? Imprinted with micro photographs of, say, newspaper articles, documents. You have to use this big machine and then go, and there's a lever, and then you have to look through each screen. Some of you might remember this. You can't mark it up. It was at my college. It was in the basement, so it made it even more onerous to have to go through that process. Okay, and then again, I went to a university for my research that was ancient in terms of its library, vast, rich holdings of books, but had to go through all of that and figure out, okay, which authors' voices, analysis resonate with my particular doctoral subject. And then, of course, when I joined the US government, I had access to classified and unclassified information, had to learn how to go through reams of information and understand, again, the sources and methods of collection, and then also to be subject to rigorous training in analytic tradecraft. All this to say that it takes time really to learn the skills of rigorous analysis, okay? And then at a certain point, you begin to have a sense of this author or this piece of writing, there's authenticity here, there's authoritative perspective here, it's credible, I can use it. So very easily, I would say now with some facility, I can look at things and say, okay, that's worth my time, that's not worth my time. So, but again, it's something.
What would you, like, what would you say is worth your time, for example?
Okay, and then also I will add before I answer your question is being able to read in the primary language. So I am fortunate to have some training in a few languages, so I'll read the original. Now, to your point, the question, I would say again, where the source, okay, does this author have a track record of writing on something? Have there been any shifts in the perspective? What institution are they part of? Or there's some other sources that are used that are not written. Okay, they're just people. I think another form of intelligence. Let's just say
Just reading media, for example, or
that's part of it. That's part of it, but that's not the only. That's not the only source. So I'm not going to elaborate more on other sources, but they're out there if you know where to find them.
My research is slightly different in the sense that I only use original language information. I don't use process information because I feel that there's going to be judgment in the processing of those original information, which is why I think our research is more foundational rather than other categories, secondary or tertiary. We use Chinese documents, Chinese government statements, Chinese academic papers, Chinese media reports. But even in the cyberspace, the Chinese language cyberspace now has so many different sources of information. And I think the arts or the trick is not just where you know how to access the information, but also triangulate and to be able to draw connections about different pieces and then try to piece together a holistic picture. It's both interesting and also frustrating because there are issues where you just can't find information, right? You know that there's a problem and you know that the problem is. One example that comes to mind is I wrote a piece at the beginning of 2018 about China's import of North Korean coal. And the custom data just does not fit the picture. It just does not fit the Chinese commitment according to UN sanction resolutions that they signed onto in the year of 2017, right? So I looked everywhere, I digged really deep in the database of the Chinese customs and the number just does not add up. So it's almost like a dead end that how do you find that information? And in the end, I was able to find from other sources that the Chinese actually moved some of the quota from one year to another. And then the data adds up. But as an analyst, you look at the data, it's just does not fit the bill, right? It's really frustrating. And with China, sometimes it's like a black hole that you can yell into, but there's no response. That's really frustrating too. And I remember because we also do field research, we travel to China, meet with scholars, meet with officials. And I remember asking them this exact question, the Ministry of Commerce, tell me, why does this data does not fit what you promised? And the answer that I would get from the Chinese officials at the time was, well, we do not lie. When you find something that seems to be inconsistent, there must be an explanation. But we cannot tell you. It's for you to figure out. so it's, I I mean, he meant well, right? He meant that, well, there is an explanation, but I cannot tell you. But if you are good, you will find it. So in the end, it turns out that, well, there is an explanation, but it's not the explanation that you originally assumed what it should be. So that's also kind of rewarding when you find out, oh, that's what you did, huh? As an analyst, it's both frustrating and rewarding at the same time.
Yeah, and I think it requires certainly, I mean, it probably helps in the sense that you grew up in that system. So, you know, you can almost like much more quickly compared to others, learn about, okay, how information is presented or shared, and, you know, at least know where to find where the missing gap might be, or find the explanation.
Pretty generous. A lot of times we still fail, like, what is the explanation? There's no explanation, but you know that, but, well, here's why I think what you mentioned about traveling there, talking to
important.
locals is really important. It gives you the flavor.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that seems unexplainable on paper, once you are on the ground and you realize that, well, this is reality you're dealing with, then it becomes much more realistic instead of an explanation.
Yeah. Well, so we have to talk about, you know, what might happen in this relationship. Because so much is happening and hinges on this relationship in today's world. What do you think will be the major developments for the next 12 months? We've got tariff suspended for 90 days. What would happen on the mark of 90 days? And will there be a Trump summit, and what else is going to happen?
I don't know what's going to happen in the next 12 days. You want to go first? I can go first.
Yeah.
Well, there is a negotiation ongoing. We know that started on, clock started on May 12th, and it's a 90-day clock. I do anticipate that there will be negotiation over the fentanyl issue. Chinese have already read it.
You mean
Their,
agreement on fentanyl or just negotiation?
I think agreement might be an overstatement at this point because we actually don't know what they may or may not agree with each other on. But I understand there are asks and there are rejection of asks. So I think that's going to be one piece of the negotiations, and the trade piece, the 90-day clock. I'm still skeptical that there will be a package deal at the end of the 90 days because a lot of the issues are structural and cannot really be resolved through 90 days or a year or 2 years. And there are some difficult questions for US to answer, such as what are we willing to sell to China, right? The high-tech products are the answer to addressing trade deficit, but for national security concerns, we're not exporting to China. So I think that's, if you just look at soybeans, that's a lot of soybeans to address the trade deficit. And if you're a trade specialist, you know that soybean is not the answer to a trade deficit that large, right? So I think there will be some level of agreement, potentially small deals on specific issues here and there, but I don't anticipate a package.
So I'll take it from another tack and go mainly micro trends of probably what most likely will happen over the next 12 months or so. I agree the trade war with China will continue even after the 90-day pause. The scope and scale of it will be determined. We'll see what happens, but that the essential nature of it will continue. The U.S. China tech race will intensify, particularly in the areas of AI, semiconductors, quantum computing, the transition from 5G to 6G, space-based technologies, satellites, et cetera, just to name a few. I think regarding, because NATO is having its summit in the summer, end of June, China will continue to ramp up its efforts to capitalize on the deterioration of US-EU relations and US-NATO relations, and will most likely try to exacerbate transatlantic discord. The fourth point would be Beijing, I believe, will also continue to watch Washington's non-committal on the Ukraine-Russia conflict and use that as part of its narrative that the emergence of a multipolar order is accelerating amid the West's decline. So this will help feed the Chinese narrative. And then, of course, the Taiwan Strait tensions that will continue to intensify and be a flashpoint in bilateral relations, I believe, over the next 12 months.
Now, I know one of the goals of doing this is to actually inspire the younger generation, or they're interested in getting involved in whether it's foreign policy or, China-specific related issues. So what is your advice to young students here or maybe graduates who are interested in getting involved? Like, what should they be doing right now? Get an internship with you?
Internship it's a tricky issue. You're supposed to pay no more like. I feel that you can welcome back. Okay, cool. The advice is, well, if you study China, you're in for a treat, job security and everything, right? Because China as a challenge or as a national security threat will last for the foreseeable future. So it's almost a blessing that if you are in the China field, then this field is only going to grow down the road. I don't see it shrinking in the years to come. But that also raises a question that I think what the chairwoman just mentioned, which is, well, do you know the language? Do you have the diversity of information? How do you draw a conclusion? How do you do analysis? And Chinese language is pretty difficult. Well, it's not the most easy to learn for a native English speaker. So would you make the investment to learn this language? And I haven't followed the recent census or the recent poll, but I think there is an observation earlier that the U.S. college students learning Chinese language is actually number is decreasing, not increasing, right? So I know that as a country specialist or as a subject matter expert, you're supposed to know the language. But on the other hand, if you're a national security strategist, knowing the language may not be required. So maybe that is another approach to the issue, that you don't actually need to speak Chinese to be a China expert, especially from a U.S. national security strategy point of view. So there are all these choices. There's also the observation that if you learn the language, if you spend too much time familiarizing with the country, then you become too sympathetic to it. I think there is something I think State Department or the foreign policy community or the diplomats are sometimes being told that you're too close to the country, that you need to have some distance. So where's the right balance, and how do you decide which path to pursue? I think that's a really difficult question.
I agree. Learning the language, it is important. Understanding the culture and history, and spending time in the country. I understand these days it may not be so easy to get there. Some are encouraged to go to Taiwan at least to pick up the language. It's better than nothing. But also to really understand the history of the country you're studying. I think that will give you a lot of insight into why their leaders make decisions the way they do and how they behave and the impact that will have on Americans. Let me just share this experience. I was in China during June 4th, 1989, the Tiananmen Massacre. I was there on a research trip. I was there toward the end of May. This was after Gorbachev had visited. So the whole ethos of perestroika and glasnost was still in the air. I was able to visit Tiananmen Square, saw the students, met the students, such an air of promise and hope that maybe China could reform. And I was staying at an overseas Chinese center in Beijing. So after visiting the square, June 4th happened. And the only media outlet that was reporting at the time was CNN. So I was watching all these images of tanks and students and seeing that a massacre had just happened down the street from me. Now, I say this because I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it was very hard for foreigners to leave the country. But before I left, my teacher there at the center, older Chinese, obviously scholar gentleman, I would say that of that ilk, said to me, when you leave, go back to America. Be an eyewitness of what you have seen. Speak the truth. And let them know, let the Americans know that not all Chinese support what has happened to our youth, our next generation. So as I was transported to the airport, I saw the charred vehicles, the tanks. And what he was essentially saying is always speak the truth. So for the next generation, you all, your experiences, personal experiences of traveling there, interacting with Chinese people, so important and formative in how you perceive China or Taiwan or the Chinese speaking counterparts that you meet, because it will help you understand what this relationship is all about on a personal level. And it will therefore have impact on what you say and how you lead when you all become leaders one day.
Great. Thank you. That's wonderful advice from both of you. So we have some time for Q&A. Please read, yeah, that late. Okay. I think she had her.
Hello, is this working?
Yep.
I'm Eleanor Randolph. I recently graduated from the Hopkins Nanjing Center. I have a question about your previous advice, which was go to China and make friends and always speak the truth. I know I have former classmates and friends who are now China analysts at various consultancies and have found themselves in the middle of our Uyghur Forced Labor Act and their national security law, and now can't get a Chinese visa, first job out of grad school. And so my question is, for hopeful future China analysts, how do you provide good and impartial analysis without ending up either risking your Chinese visa or getting snagged up in national security concerns here?
Let's get
Mhm.
more questions and then we'll respond. I think, yeah.
Hi, my name is Tony Wu. I'm a student at UC San Diego, and I'm interning with the Council on Foreign Relations. And I just had a question about some of the topics that we've been talking about all night, which is how do we bridge the understanding between Chinese and Americans? And as somebody who was born in China, but has been through the American education system my whole life, my views on China are shaped by the education that I've received here, and also media perceptions of China here. And I always knew that was the case for me, but I didn't realize how much it had affected me until I actually came to a conference here at GW, and I met a Chinese PhD student, and we had a conversation. And I asked her a question along the lines of, there's a major economic crisis, or not economic crisis, but economic slowdown in China. Graduates are struggling to find work. There's a housing crisis. Will this produce a political backlash in China? And she kind of just stared at me and laughed at me incredulously, as if I was asking her something in a different language. And it just struck me that I had a very warped perception of the political and social climate in China. And so my question is, what do you guys think are some of the areas of misunderstanding between the two peoples? and both from like a 40,000 foot policy level and from a on the ground cultural level. And how can we move ahead and address those misunderstandings? Thank you.
To the two. These are great. First, about national security concerns and career.
I can go first. Choose versus national security concerns. Gee, that's hard. At least for, I think it depends on the role that you're trying to play. I think it's particularly difficult for reporters because their job is to report what is happening on the ground. It's kind of made easier because there's not a lot of access. So you can't really report on it, but people rely on satellite imagery, rely on other sources of information to report on it. But I feel that if you are a government analyst, what you produce is not necessarily for public consumption. So which means that the Chinese government, I think they're a lot of times they're more concerned about public humiliation rather than what is actually being understood by the U.S. government. I think that's not a terrific answer, but at least in my observation, it depends on what the information is used for and what profession you are pursuing. For companies that are restricted or constrained by U.S. legislations, I think the answer is actually relatively easy because if there is a U.S. law prohibiting certain type of activities or engagement in China, then there's a law. There's very little that you can do to violate it. There's a lot you can do, but there will be consequences. So that is almost not a question because you don't have that choice, which also made it, I guess, slightly easier, but not really so. On the issue of people's understanding of each other, I think it's a danger of simplicity, the danger of oversimplification, that when Chinese talk about Americans these days is, oh, how about the price of your eggs? Are you Americans suffering from the short of supply from everything from swimming suit to baby shoes? I think that's a very oversimplified version of what is going on with the U.S. market and U.S. consumers. But that's all they think of because that's what their social media and the government propaganda is projecting. I think the oversimplification also exists here when we look at China. That either there's a version that, oh, well, China is so well developed. Look at their quantum physics. Look at their infrastructure. Chinese also are so proud of their infrastructure. Our high-speed railway is so much better than your Amtrak. So, which is true, but that's not the whole truth. That's only one piece of the truth, right? So I think that's actually a good example because people tend to grab onto one piece of evidence and develop a whole generalization about another country and about another people. And that is so not true. And Amtrak, yes, it certainly reflects one side of the American life. And I would say that our internet is something, but that's not the whole truth. So the test to the danger of oversimplification, which exists on both sides of the Pacific.
Yeah, in the national security field, obviously, if you're looking for a position that requires security clearances, they're going to ask about where you've been, your who you know on the other side. So that's a personal decision that you have to decide what you're willing to sacrifice to get that security clearance. In the corporate sector, it may be a little easier. There's a lot of demand for China expertise and explaining U.S. China relations, and companies are, unless they are serving a government contractor, they're really interested really in market access and the bottom line. So that's something to consider too. Maybe get some corporate experience first. And then regarding perceptions, demystifying perceptions of each other. This is an age-old issue, propaganda on both sides. In the people-to-people experiences or opportunities that I've been a part of with nonprofit organizations and trade organizations. You just start off with, I'm a human being, you're a human being, let's have a conversation, and then peel away, okay, all the uh, misperceptions of what others are saying about us and get to know people. I think the more the more there's this people-to-people interaction, the track to diplomacy, and hopefully there will be some improvement along those lines. That's why organizations such as these, both of these, to help educate people about the other one another is helpful. So get plugged in to these kind of organizations to get educated and to raise awareness on both sides.
If I may, I'm going to respond to your question. I think because you're young. So one of the, and this is from my own personal experience, because once you've lived long enough, you see things change over time. So the climate was very different 15, 20 years ago than now, right? So you don't know what you're doing right now is going to have some impact in the future, right? So I've heard, I don't know if that's true or not, you know, if you have too much China experience, that may be to your disadvantage these days, right? If you want to join the government in some way, there's some suspicion around things like that. And so what I'm trying to say is the more important thing is to figure out what you really want to do rather than letting the fear sort of stand in your way. Because the most important thing is you will do things really well when you're truly passionate and you believe in it, rather than sort of, oh, I'm so concerned about not doing this, not getting involved in that, not having that experience because somehow there's that national security concern, right? Like, don't let fear make decisions for you. I think that's a really important sort of feeling at a younger age. And on your point, there's nothing, in my view, that's better than truly just going there and have that experience. Like what, you know, Sun was saying, actually everything about China that's reported out there, most of it is right. It's about proportion, right? So it's out of balance. Is it blown out of proportion on this one or that one? But each one of them, standalone, is not really wrong, right? But you got to be able to know, okay, how do I couple everything together and then have a more sort of comprehensive and balanced view so you're not, your view is not skewed, right? Like what you're saying, like economic issues out there. Yeah, real estate is terrible and all that. But if you go to Shanghai, if you go to Beijing, people are actually, you know, if you go to the middle class place, people still live very well and, you know, seem like they're living a good life. So it depends on which slice you're looking at. And I just think there's nothing better than you witnessing things on your own. So you're making the judgment yourself.
And don't just go to Beijing and Shanghai.
Exactly, exactly. Sorry, I'm just using these
Right.
as an example. Yes, yes, yes. Sorry. Yes.
My name is Jie Gao, and thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very helpful. So my question is two parts, and I think is more direct related to Ms. Sun Yun in terms of your experience. So I work as a research associate at Asia Society, and we also got the chance to communicate with a lot of Chinese delegations here. But like, how do you get them, as you said in your analogy, like yelling at a black hole? Like, so how do you get to have a very like constructive conversation, but moving beyond the talking points? Because a lot of time, they just keep repeating the same thing. So it's really hard to see like what the, like the true feelings they have. And on the other hand, from, like as you're living here, as a Chinese-born analyst, I'm sure your caveats are very valuable. However, like how can you avoid yourself being labeled as a CCP woman kind of thing, like among the U.S. policymakers? Because I did hear, stories of, especially amid this political climate, how receptive you think your perspectives are among the U.S. policymakers and strategists. Thank you so much.
Let's take another.
Yeah, hi. I'm okay. Yeah, thank you. My name is.
For the recording.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Qiang. I'm a George Washington University student and unofficial bodyguard to Ambassador Chang. Um, yeah, she knows it. So my question is for the students who don't really want to get in the great power competition career field and are looking for more of a collaborative field between U.S. China. What specific sectors of the economy would you recommend us focus on, whether if it's climate, space, etc.? Thank you.
I'll go first. How to get beyond the talking points, boys? That's a like the $1 million question. How do you get the Chinese beyond their talking points? They just spend 80% of the meeting talking about things I can read from. I can read from people's dailies. You don't need to give me that. I think coming prepared is really important. So the questions that you ask would not allow them the opportunity to read their official position. You have to be very specific about what you are asking about and the specific piece of information that you're looking for. And do not give them the opportunity, well, because after all, these are track to dialogues, right? These are not foreign policy or foreign ministry spokesperson regular press conference. So if you ask them, I was not successful in 2018. Now, how do you square the circle between your custom data and your UN Security Council commitment? So I didn't get the answer, but I feel that when your question is so specific, it gives them less ability to just throw their propaganda at you. And you also have to think that why are they having these conversations with you, right? Why did they travel across the Pacific Ocean, come to the United States? Is it just to deliver the talking points, or talking points is just a part of the formalities that they have to get over with before they can move on to the real conversation? Which is why that a lot of the conversations during the track twos are not happening in the meeting rooms. It happened during the tea break, sometimes happen over drinks, depending on not required, but it helps. So it's those communications and those interactions that I think helps a lot. The receptiveness of the of my analysis, that's a great question. Because as an analyst, I don't care. I'm reflecting the analysis of the issue as I see is true. I build my case, I build my commentary, build my argument based on original language evidence, based on field research. And if you agree with it, great. If you don't, never mind. So my purpose is not to sell it to anybody. My purpose is to tell a story. And this is a story that I believe in. On the issue of people not interested in great power competition, why are you here? I'm sorry. That's sorry, that came out wrong. I feel that there are a lot of field between US and China that are currently not but they can't escape this great power competition narrative, right? If you're engaged in people-to-people exchange, then well, who is your Chinese partner? What kind of propaganda have you received in China? Climate change, currently not a priority for the administration. Women's issue, currently not a priority. But I feel that for the business world, there's still a huge potential for students to engage in. And I know that if you look at the official talking points again from both sides about the business or the trade relationship, it's all bad, it's all negative, the trade deficit and the unfair trade practices. But we're still making, for US businesses operating in China, the revenue every year is still $500 billion. And we don't talk about that, right? Not in the government or the policy narrative. But I think that is a manifestation of the actual importance of the bilateral economic relationship, not necessarily for the government, but for the whole non-government or the private sector, which I believe present a lot of potential for students interested in China.
I would just underscore there are a lot of opportunities in the corporate sector. The great power competition, all of that, it will trickle down, but there are areas where, again, businesses, they're focused on market access, bottom line, technology, check with NVIDIA if they have job openings. They're booming. They're now going into following the Middle East trip. Jensen Huang is going to sell what, 500,000 AI chips to the Middle East. So it does not necessarily have to be stateside. If you want to go abroad, spend some time abroad. But I think the main thing here is the world is global. China's global. You have a global view of what you want to do, go pursue it, and just be educated about, okay, this is just an element of international relations that we're dealing with, but you have your life to live and there are opportunities out there. Go and get them.
So with that, we'll conclude.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'll introduce myself to then conclude, but my name is Rosie Levine. I'm the Executive Director of USCET, and we are so delighted to be able to hold this panel, not only with enormous thanks to our three panelists who really, I think, brought a really different type of conversation to us today, centering their experiences in U.S. China history, but also just, I think, really helpful advice for those in this room. I'll just make two kind of quick plugs before we close, and with the hope that you all stay and join us for a networking reception after this event concludes. But if you like this program, USCET is holding a monthly series that this is a part of called China Connections. The next event will be on June 13th, and we'll be featuring Jeffrey Wasserstrom, who's a professor of history, in dialogue with Evan Osnos, the New Yorker correspondent. So we hope you'll be back and joining us for that event on June 13th. And there's flyers around the room, so you can sign up there if you take a look at those. And more broadly, USCET is deeply committed to getting more American expertise on China, trying to continue to bridge these bonds and build these ties that I think were so eloquently described in this conversation, encouraging the next generation of Americans to have time on the ground, learn the language, get to meet counterparts in China, and better use that analysis to help better do their work here in the United States. So if you're interested in USCET or want to get involved, want to volunteer for future events, please find us as well. And very, very lastly, but not least, a huge thanks to our partners at the Women's Foreign Policy Group, the staff of both organizations and interns who made this event possible, and to you all for joining us. So please join me in applause. Thanks. So we will be here in the back. We've got some food. We have some drinks. We hope you'll join us. And we have a great distinguished audience with us today. I see many folks in this room who are younger in their careers, some more established. So please mix and get to know each other. And we hope you'll stay and enjoy. So thanks for joining us.